Wife said she couldn't bring me to her college reunion because they banned spouses. But then her friend texted me photos of her spending time with her ex-boyfriend. Hello, trust is the foundation of any strong marriage, but what happens when cracks begin to form in that foundation, small at first, barely noticeable, until they widen into something impossible to ignore? My name is Adam, and until recently, I thought my wife, Sarah, and I had an unshakable bond. We'd been married for 6 years, built a comfortable life together, and had even started discussing having kids in the near future. I never imagined that a simple invitation to her college reunion would be the beginning of the end. It all started 6 weeks ago when Sarah brought up her 10-year college reunion in Colorado. She was excited about the event, reminiscing about her university days and the friendships she had built. "It's going to be a whole weekend," she told me, scrolling through an email on her phone. "Everyone's bringing their spouses. It'll be fun, kind of like a little vacation for us." I was immediately on board. Colorado had always been on my list of places to visit, and the idea of meeting her old college friends sounded interesting. I imagined us hiking in the Rockies, trying out local restaurants, and maybe even taking a scenic drive through the mountains. "That sounds perfect," I said, already picturing the getaway. Over the next few weeks, Sarah told me stories about her college friends: James, the funny and reliable one; Emily, her former roommate who now worked in finance; and Miguel, who had apparently been a bit of a wild card back in the day but had since settled down. She spoke about them fondly, laughing at old memories and inside jokes I wasn't a part of. Yet there was one name she never mentioned: Ethan. Ethan was Sarah's college ex-boyfriend, a serious relationship that had lasted nearly 3 years before they broke up a few months before graduation. I knew about him from past conversations, though Sarah had always been vague about the details. From what little I gathered, their relationship had been intense but ended amicably. At least, that's what she had told me. I didn't think much of it at the time, but in hindsight, her silence about Ethan in all these reunion conversations should have been a red flag. As the trip approached, I prepared as well. I bought a new pair of hiking boots, some trail-friendly clothes, and even researched a few good restaurants in the area. Sarah seemed pleased with my enthusiasm, and for a while, everything felt normal. We even made plans to extend our stay for an extra day so we could explore beyond the reunion activities. Then, 10 days before we were set to leave, everything changed. I was in the middle of a work call when Sarah walked into my home office, her expression hesitant. "Hey, babe," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "So, there's been a change of plans with the reunion." I raised an eyebrow, muting my call. "What kind of change?" She sighed, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "Apparently, the venue is smaller than they expected. They had a lot more people RSVP than they planned for, and they decided to limit it to alumni only." I frowned, disappointment settling in. "So no spouses?" "Yeah," she said, biting her lip. "I'm really sorry. I know we were looking forward to it." I won't lie, I was a little frustrated, but I didn't see any reason to question her. "Plans change, right?" I nodded, pushing aside my disappointment. "Well, that sucks, but it's not your fault. I guess I'll just hang back here." Sarah seemed relieved by my easy acceptance, but something about her demeanor felt off. It wasn't the news itself that bothered me, but the way she delivered it. There was an odd tension in her body, a carefulness in her words, like she was trying too hard to make it sound normal. Still, I brushed it off, not wanting to make a big deal out of nothing. Over the next few days, however, little things started to add up. I noticed Sarah packing more meticulously than usual, spending extra time selecting outfits, carefully folding each piece, and even debating which makeup products to bring. Normally, when she traveled for short trips, she was more casual, throwing a few essentials into a suitcase without much thought. But this time, she packed multiple dresses, extra heels, and more makeup than I'd ever seen her take on a weekend trip. I made a joke about it while watching her pack. "Babe, are you sure you're going to a reunion and not a fashion show?" She laughed, but it was forced. "I just want to look nice," she said, zipping up her bag. It's been 10 years since I've seen these people. Her explanation made sense, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Then there were the phone calls. A few times in the evenings, I caught her talking in hushed tones, always walking into another room when she answered certain calls. When I asked who it was, she'd quickly brush it off. Just Emily, she'd say, or James had a question about the schedule. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe I was overthinking things. But deep down, a tiny, nagging voice whispered that something wasn't right. Still, I didn't push it. I trusted my wife. At least I thought I did. But when she left for Colorado that weekend, I had no idea that trust was about to be shattered. Sarah left early Friday morning. I helped carry her bags to the car, kissed her goodbye, and wished her a great time. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'll text you when I land," she said, getting into the driver's seat. I watched her drive away, shaking off the strange feeling that lingered in my chest. I told myself I was being ridiculous. This was my wife, the woman I trusted more than anyone. I had no reason to doubt her. That illusion shattered just a few hours later. It started with a text from James. "James. Hey man, I thought you were coming to the reunion? Sarah said you were too busy with work?" I stared at the message, my pulse quickening. Nah, I wanted to, but Sarah said spouses weren't allowed because of venue capacity. The typing bubble appeared instantly. "James, that's weird. Plenty of people brought their spouses." My stomach twisted. Plenty of people brought their spouses. So Sarah had lied. Why? I tried to come up with an explanation. Maybe she had misunderstood, or maybe something changed last minute. But before I could fully process it, James sent another message that sent my world spinning. "James, I thought you should know, she's been spending a lot of time with Ethan. I saw them go into his cabin together after the group hike today. They were in there for over an hour. Alone." I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. I read the message over and over, hoping I had misunderstood. But the words stayed the same, taunting me. Are you sure? Ethan's there? James, yeah? And Sarah told everyone you couldn't make it because of work. She never mentioned the spouse rule. My hands were shaking as I opened my call log. I found Sarah's name and dialed, my heart pounding against my ribs. She answered on the third ring, her voice cheerful. "Hey, babe! How's your day going?" I didn't bother with small talk. "Sarah, where are you right now?" A pause. Just with the group." "Why?" I clenched my jaw. "James just texted me. He said he saw you with Ethan." Another pause, longer this time. Then she laughed, too quickly, too forced. "Ethan? He's not even here. He moved to Europe a while ago, remember?" The blatant lie sent a rush of anger through me. I pulled up my phone records and scrolled through Sarah's recent calls. I had barely paid attention to them before, but now I saw a pattern, repeated calls to a number I didn't recognize. The same number, over and over, in the weeks leading up to the reunion. I copied the number and sent it to James. "Is this Ethan's number?" His reply came seconds later. "James, yeah? That's him. He moved back from London a few months ago after his divorce." I felt sick. Sarah had not only lied about Ethan's presence, but she had been in frequent contact with him. The puzzle pieces were falling into place, and I hated the picture they were forming. I hung up and took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. My next call was to my sister, Emily. She was a family law attorney, and while I wasn't ready to make any drastic decisions, I needed advice. She listened carefully as I laid everything out: the suspicious packing, the last-minute spouse ban, James's texts, the hidden phone calls. When I finished, she sighed. "This doesn't look good, Adam," she said gently. "I'm not saying she's cheating, but she's definitely hiding something. Be careful." That night, I checked social media, looking for anything that might confirm my worst fears. It didn't take long. A friend of Sarah's had posted a group picture from the reunion dinner. There was Sarah, dressed in a sleek black dress, looking more polished than I had ever seen her for a casual gathering. And beside her, Ethan. They weren't touching, but they were close, closer than old friends should be. I kept scrolling, finding more pictures from the weekend. Each time, it was the same, Sarah and Ethan together, always near each other, always in their own little world. Meanwhile, the texts she sent me were vague. "Having fun?" Or, "It's been great catching up with everyone." Never a mention of Ethan. Never a real update. The next morning, I called her again. This time, I was ready. "Sarah," I said, keeping my voice steady, "why did you lie about the spouse rule?" She hesitated. I didn't want things to be awkward with Ethan." I closed my eyes, trying to keep my temper in check. "So he is there?" She exhaled sharply. "Yes, but it's not a big deal. I just thought it would be easier if you didn't come." I let that sink in. She had deliberately excluded me, not because of venue capacity, but because of Ethan. "And the cabin?" I asked coldly. "You spent an hour alone with him?" "It wasn't like that," she snapped, frustration creeping into her voice. "We were just talking. Catching up." "Talking," I echoed. "For over an hour. Alone. In his cabin." "Yes," she insisted. "Nothing happened. I just didn't want you to get the wrong idea." "The wrong idea?" I laughed bitterly. "Sarah, do you even hear yourself? You lied about spouses. You told everyone I was too busy with work. You've been talking to Ethan behind my back for weeks. And now you expect me to believe you just talked in his cabin?" Silence. Then, quietly, she said, "I didn't cheat on you, Adam." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the trust between us had already cracked, and no matter how many times I turned the conversation over in my head, nothing made sense. I couldn't be in the house that night. I packed an overnight bag and drove to my sister's place. Sarah called me repeatedly, sent texts begging me to talk, but I couldn't. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel like her husband. I felt like a fool. And deep down, I knew this wasn't over yet. I spent the next few nights at my sister's house, ignoring Sarah's endless calls and texts. Each message blurred into the next, apologies, explanations, pleas for me to come home. But I couldn't bring myself to respond. I needed time. I needed clarity. 2 weeks passed, and my mind was no clearer than when I had left. Sarah stuck to her story, insisting that nothing had happened, that she had only lied to avoid awkwardness. But the more I thought about it, the less sense it made. If there was nothing to hide, why had she gone to such great lengths to deceive me? Then, James reached out again. "James, hey, I thought you should know. Sarah and Ethan were together the whole reunion. It wasn't just one night or one hike. They were inseparable." I stared at the message, feeling my stomach drop. "Me, what do you mean?" "James, every event, every dinner, every after-party, they were together. Always whispering, always slipping off on their own. People noticed, Adam. A few even asked if you two were still married. That was the final straw. I couldn't keep pretending this was just a misunderstanding. Sarah had deliberately removed me from that weekend to be with Ethan, and I would never know the full extent of what had happened. I called my sister that night. "I want a divorce." She sighed, as if she had been expecting it. "I'll help you get started." When I told Sarah, she broke down. "Please, Adam," she sobbed. "We can fix this. Let's do counseling, let's talk, don't throw everything away over one mistake." "One mistake?" I said, shaking my head. "Sarah, it wasn't one mistake. It was weeks of deception. Months of lying. You planned this." She cried harder, swearing up and down that nothing physical had happened, that it was just a rekindled emotional connection. But I couldn't believe her. And honestly, at that point, it didn't even matter. The trust was gone. I moved out within a week, signing a lease on a small apartment across town. Sarah begged me to reconsider, but I refused. I needed distance. I needed a fresh start. And then, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. One evening, I ran into Ryan, an old acquaintance from Sarah's college days. We had never been close, but he recognized me instantly. "Hey, Adam," he said carefully. "I heard about you and Sarah. I'm really sorry." Something about the way he said it made me pause. "What exactly did you hear?" Ryan hesitated, then exhaled. "Look, man. I don't want to make things worse, but Ethan's been bragging. He told some people that he and Sarah slept together at the reunion." The world tilted. I swallowed hard. "He said that?" Ryan nodded. "Twice. He made it sound like they planned it." Rage burned in my chest. For weeks, Sarah had sworn up and down that nothing had happened. That she had only talked to Ethan. And yet, here was someone saying Ethan had told a completely different story. I confronted Sarah immediately. "Ryan told me Ethan claimed you slept together. Do you still expect me to believe you?" She gasped, her voice trembling. "He's lying!" "Adam, you know I wouldn't." I cut her off. "I don't know anything anymore, Sarah." But I wasn't done. I tracked down Ethan myself, demanding the truth. He smirked at first, then, seeing the fury in my eyes, backpedaled. "All right, fine," he said. "We didn't sleep together. We kissed. That's it." I stared at him in disbelief. "And she let it happen?" "She told me your marriage was struggling," Ethan said, shrugging. "That things hadn't been good for a while." My heart pounded in my ears. Struggling? We had been talking about starting a family. She had never once said she was unhappy. And yet, to Ethan, she had painted our marriage as broken. I confronted Sarah one last time. "So now it was just a kiss?" Tears streamed down her face. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake." I clenched my jaw. "The mistake was thinking I'd ever trust you again." The divorce proceeded quickly after that. Sarah stopped fighting it once she realized I wasn't budging. She sent long, emotional emails, but I barely read them. My mind was made up. Then, the final blow came. 2 days before our divorce was finalized, Sarah sent me one last email. "Adam, I owe you the full truth. I slept with Ethan. Twice. I won't make excuses. It wasn't a mistake, it was a choice, and I hate myself for it. I knew what I was doing, and I did it anyway. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I won't ask for it. But I do want you to know that I regret everything. Not just what I did, but how I treated you. You were an amazing husband, and I threw it away. I'll always be sorry." Sarah, I stared at the email for a long time. Then, without replying, I closed it. For the first time in weeks, I felt at peace. I was finally free.